The sun began to set over the streets of Sacramento as Eric Porter was on his way home after a long day at work. His sedan emitted a soft hum as he adjusted the air conditioner, eager to shake off the stress. Today, the radio played softly in the background. He approached a yellow traffic light and slowed down completely as it turned red. Suddenly, blue and red lights flashed behind him, accompanied by the sound of a siren, the sharp sound of the police alarm. Eric looked in the rearview mirror, furrowed his brows slightly, then pulled over to the side of the road and rolled down his window as a police car stopped behind him. An officer named Bradley Larson, a man in his mid-30s with short hair and a badge gleaming on his chest, got out. Larson adjusted his belt as he strutted toward Eric's car, a man who looked like he was in control. Larson curtly asked Eric for his license and registration. Eric complied without a word, reaching into the glove compartment to get his registration papers and handing his driver's license to him. His movements were confident and calm, but he could feel Larson's gaze examining him, as if he were looking for a reason to hassle him further. Larson asked as he leaned on the window, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" Eric replied in a polite but firm tone, "I'm not entirely sure." Larson said hesitantly, "You didn't come to a complete stop at the sign." Eric frowned but nodded slightly. "I see. I thought I slowed down in time, but I understand." Larson didn't respond immediately. He stayed where he was, his eyes narrowing as he studied Eric closely. It was no longer just a routine stop, at least not for Larson. His body language changed noticeably, as if he had already decided that this was more than just a minor violation. The officer looked at the license in his hand and asked sharply, "You're not from around here, are you?" Eric hesitated for a split second before answering, then said, "I moved here a few months ago. My address is on the license." But Larson wasn't really listening because his questions started to take on a sharp tone, enough to indicate that he was no longer interested in a traffic violation. Eric's calmness seemed to irritate him, so he asked again, "Where were you headed in such a hurry?" Eric answered him, "Just home." Larson stepped back, walked in a small circle in front of the car, clearly confused. Frick handled the situation differently than usual. There was no fear, no stuttering, no fidgeting. He didn't act like other people. Instead, he dealt with it with a controlled composure and an unsettling calm that caused confusion. Larson grew tense and muttered quietly, "You seem very confident, as if you know what's going to happen." After that, Eric tilted his head slightly, avoiding the trap of the question. "Confidence isn't the issue here, officer. Respect is the issue." Larson froze momentarily before facing Eric, taking a defensive stance. He tried to respond but couldn't. Eric's calmness unsettled him, and the tense silence made Larson realize things wouldn't go as expected. Instead of backing down, he pushed the issue further. Larson tapped his fingers on the clipboard attached to his belt in an attempt to hide his frustration. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially by someone like Eric. His eyes glanced at the sedan as if searching for an excuse he hadn't made. Then he said curtly, "Turn around, put your hands on the hood." "I need to check for weapons?" Eric sarcastically repeated, "Weapons?" as he raised his eyebrow. "Do I look like someone carrying a weapon?" Larson clenched his jaw, and for a moment his composure broke, and he said, "I won't ask you that again." Eric turned around without a word and placed his palms on the hood of his car. Larson approached and frisked Eric with quick, rough movements, and his hands lingered longer than necessary. It wasn't just a search. It was an attempt to show dominance and control, to provoke a reaction. But Eric didn't flinch or tense up, and he didn't move an inch under the intrusive inspection. Then Larson muttered, "You're clean," and stepped back. It was annoying for Larson, as if he was angry that he hadn't found anything to justify his suspicions. Eric turned to face him, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. Then he simply said, "Of course I am." "Now, officer, if you're finished—" Larson interrupted him loudly, "I'm not finished. Now tell me, you seem to know a lot about what I can and cannot do. Would you care to explain why?" Eric folded his arms, his posture relaxed despite the rising tension between them, then said, "I've been through enough situations with people in authority like you. Let's just say I've learned a lot over the years." Larson narrowed his eyes and said, "So you're a lawyer or something like that?" Eric replied with a mysterious smile, "Something like that." His answer provoked Larson even more, so he got very close to Eric, then said in a low, growling voice, "Listen, do you think you're smarter than me? Do you think you can beat me with words?" Their eyes met in a clear challenge. Then he said, "I don't think anything, officer. I just believe in justice. And so far, I don't see much of it here." Larson took the bait and fell into Eric's trap. "Justice? You think this case is about justice? People like you always—" Then he suddenly stopped because Eric's look terrified him. With just one glance, Eric made Larson understand that he knew exactly what Larson wanted to say. Eric repeated in a strong voice, "People like me?" Larson meant people with dark skin. Larson became furious and took a step back, as if he realized he had made a mistake he couldn't take back. He muttered, "You know what I mean?" Eric replied calmly, "I think I know." But his calmness was no longer passive, it was sharp as a blade, and I think we both know that stopping me is no longer about a traffic violation. Larson opened his mouth to reply, but the words didn't come out, and for the first time, he seemed unsure of how to proceed. The balance of power was shifting, as if Larson was standing on shaky ground, but the moment of reckoning was still coming, and it would be a moment Larson would never forget. Eric's voice broke the heavy silence, and he said firmly, "Officer, I think it's time you knew who I am." Larson furrowed his brows, his sharpness returning, and he replied arrogantly, "I don't care who you are." Eric reached into his pocket, his movements slow and deliberate, and said calmly, "I'm reaching for my badge." Larson's eyes followed Eric's hand as he pulled out a leather wallet and opened it, revealing a shiny badge. He said in a neutral tone, "Eric Porter, Head of Internal Affairs in Sacramento." Larson froze, his eyes darting to the badge and then back to Eric's face, hoping this was some kind of joke. He asked hesitantly, "Internal Affairs?" Eric continued, "Yes. I oversee officer conduct. My job is to make sure that the people who wear this badge uphold the integrity and values it's supposed to represent." Larson's face paled, his confidence fading. He took a small step back, his hand dropping away from his belt. Eric stepped forward, closing the gap Larson had instinctively created. Then he asked in a calm voice, "Do you know what the most troubling part of this situation is, officer?" "Larson?" Larson didn't answer. He was frozen, not knowing what to do, as if he were stuck in quicksand. Eric continued saying, "It's not about profiling, although that's bad enough, and it's not about the baseless escalation either. It's about the fact that you did all of this without even realizing who you were talking to. You assume that I don't know my rights, that I don't understand the laws you swore to uphold. And why is that?" Eric answered him relentlessly, "Because I didn't fit your idea of someone worthy of respect." Eric finished his words. His words weren't angry, but they carried the weight of an indictment. And he continued saying, "And this isn't just a problem for me, officer, it's a problem for anyone like me that you meet." Eric took a step back, giving Larson some space to breathe, and said calmly, though his voice didn't lose its edge, "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take a step back, you'll return my documents, and you'll think carefully about what you're going to say." After that, Larson's lips parted, but he hesitated. He didn't know what to say, and he didn't return the documents. Eric added in a slightly lower voice, "You'll hear from me again, but not as a driver stopped on the side of the road, rather as a man tasked with determining whether you're fit to wear this badge." Larson swallowed hard, his face turning red. Then he reached into his breast pocket, pulled out Eric's license and registration, and his hands trembled slightly as he handed them over. Eric took them without a word and put them in his wallet. He walked over to the driver's side door of his car, stopped with his hand on the handle, and looked over his shoulder, staring at Larson one last time. Then he said, "Remember this, Officer Larson. The badge doesn't make you better than anyone else. It makes you responsible to everyone." Eric got into his car and started the engine, leaving Larson standing in the dim light, his confidence shaken and his future uncertain. But for Eric, it was never over. What he was about to do would spread throughout the entire department. He drove his car calmly, but his mind was preoccupied. Larson wasn't the first officer Eric had dealt with this way, and he knew he wouldn't be the last. But this time, things would be different. This time, Eric had the authority to act. The next morning, Eric sat at his desk with the early sunlight streaming through his office blinds. In the Internal Affairs Department of the Sacramento Police, there was an open file in front of him. Officer Bradley Larson's record was not spotless. There were minor complaints about unprofessional behavior, excessive stops, and a vague misunderstanding that was not properly addressed. Eric leaned back in his chair, his fingers interlaced as he thought about it. Larson wasn't corrupt. He was a symptom of a deeper problem. Later that day, Eric sat across from Chief Daniels, his boss, as they met in the conference room. Daniels, a seasoned veteran with gray hair, leaned back in his chair, listening attentively. As Eric recounted the traffic stop incident, his voice was steady but firm. I could have just considered it another bad reaction, but that would be wrong. Larson's behavior isn't an isolated incident. It's a reflection of how much work we still have to do. Daniels rubbed his temples and exhaled slowly, saying, I admit this isn't the first time Larson's name has come up. But we always handle it quietly internally, Eric replied. And that's the problem. Quiet doesn't fix anything. Quiet lets him keep going. It's time for us to be loud. Daniels looked at him and said, What do you suggest? Eric said, A review at the department level, not just a review of individual offices, but of our training, protocols, and systems. We can't keep hiding these flaws. If we don't apply quality to ourselves, how can we expect the community to trust us? Mal Daniels leaned forward with his hands clasped on the table, then said, This is going to cause some problems. Eric said simply, Good. It's about time someone did it. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings, interviews, and reports. Eric worked tirelessly gathering data, talking to officers, and holding public forums to hear directly from the community. The Larson incident became a catalyst for change, a turning point that forced the department to confront its flaws head-on. For his part, Larson faced an internal hearing. Eric attended in person, sitting across from Larson during the proceedings, watching the officer squirm under questioning. The hearing resulted in Larson being suspended from duty, but Eric knew that the real victory wasn't in punishing Larson, but in preventing another Larson from emerging. Months later, Eric stood on a conference stage, addressing a room full of officers, city officials, and local residents. He spoke not about blame, but about responsibility, about the shared duty to create a system that works for everyone. His words were not just a call for accountability, but a promise of change. Eric said, Justice is not just about catching the bad guys, but about making sure that the people who swore to protect and serve do so with integrity, fairness, and respect for everyone they encounter. This is the badge I believe in, and this is the badge we are building together here. The applause was thunderous, but Eric didn't stay in it for long. For him, this wasn't the end of the story, but the beginning of a better one. As Eric left the stage, he saw the crowd's faces, some skeptical, some optimistic, but all attentive. He knew that change wouldn't come overnight, but it would start now. And that was enough. If this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, discuss it, and talk about things that help bring about positive change. Finally, subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge, inspire, and remind us of what we can achieve when we stand up for what's right.